From the New Arts and Media Studios in Milwaukee, I'm Charles Purcell. This is The Log. All right, since last we spoke, I wanted to just give a really quick opinion on a story that happened a couple of weeks ago. That New York Police Department sergeant who died in the line of duty, the funeral became this political thing where the cop union was telling New York politicians, don't come to this funeral, you're not welcome. So-called anti-cop politicians. It became really kind of disgusting. And the Orange Menace showed up at this thing. The one thing you do need to know, if you don't know, that when you think of union, when you think of a labor union, that's not to be confused with police unions. They're very, very different in nature. They've really taken on a very sort of strident, right-wing, reactionary sort of philosophy about crime and punishment, and especially since the summer of 2020 and the demonstrations over George Floyd, because that was such a weird juxtaposition. There have been large demonstrations throughout our nation's history, and the police have always been there. But the point here is that for the first time in 2020, it was really all about the cops. The people on the street demonstrating, they weren't demonstrating a war, they weren't demonstrating political leaders, or, they weren't demonstrating for civil rights or women's rights or LGBTQ rights. They were marching to protest the very people who are assigned to protect them during their protest, right? This is different not by quality, but by kind. Just fundamentally different. And that was to my viewing of this, it really took a turn. And the whole, the blue line flag thing, which was a direct response to the Black Lives Matter movement and the so-called, all lives matter and cops' lives matter. And it became really reactionary and very political to now these so-called unions, benevolent associations, whatever you want to call them, these cop unions have become these sort of exaggerated, hyper-partisan advocates for kind of right-wingery, and they're very much aligned with the right wing politically, with Republicans specifically. And the fact that they would go so far as to make a public statement disinviting any New York so-called anti-cop politicians, and then the Orange Menace actually showed up at this cop's funeral as what? As a campaign stop? It's just despicable. It's like clearing the streets of Lafayette Square to go across and hold a Bible up, in front of a church, to show up at a cop's funeral. We can't be having this. We can't be having this kind of divide. I'm really just sick to death of people lecturing me to, you just have to get along, you have to compromise. There are no two sides to this. One side has just gone off their rocker. First of all, anti-cop? Nobody's anti-cop. Even at the very height of defund the police, which lasted about a day and a half, because everybody knew that slogan wasn't going to work on the general public as any kind of, effective slogan. Even at the very height of that, even the people promoting defund the police, and I count myself among the most vocal about that, none of us want to make the world less safe. We're not on the side of criminals. We just wanted to redirect funding, resources, to where they would be the most effective and where people would actually be made safer. So I won't go into that whole argument again, but that's what it was. It was a redistribution of resources. Nobody wants cops to starve. Nobody wants them to get hurt. There's been a large outcry about local district attorneys not enforcing laws enough and allowing for bail and such and such. And okay, you can have that debate. I've said it a million times, and it bears repeating. I'm fine with political debate. That's something that could be debated. How that's handled, sure. But labeling somebody anti-cop and pro-crime because you want, that's how the left and that's how Democrats are described now by the right wing. They literally say we want to destroy America. That's what we on the left want to do. We want to destroy America. We want it to be less safe. Yeah, it's just nutty. So, yeah, before too many weeks passed, I wanted to go back and just mention that story because it's just sort of, it's so wrong in so many ways and so indicative of what's going on. One of which being this characterization of Democrats or the left generally, and I hesitate to put them in the same camp because I consider myself a capital L true lefty. But anyway, this characterization that everybody left of Mitt Romney is a somehow rabid communist revolutionary is just so wrong. Nobody's anti-cop. Everybody wants public safety. Everybody wants cops to be safe. Nobody wants cops to be killed. Just get over that. And when you find this hyper-political language being used, reject that, please. Let's get to the last few days in the last week since we spoke. Okay, we got to talk a little bit about Gaza because this has been quite an eventful week. Just as we spoke last time were the killings of these 6 Western aid workers from World Central Kitchen and their Palestinian driver. So 7 killed in this attack. And okay, so of course it's terrible. Of course it was. And it became now a catalyst for an outrage that many of us have shared now for 6 months. But because they're Westerners, because 6 of them were white, UK, Australia, where else were they from? I forgot exactly. I think there's one American. Anyway, now we're going to get upset. And Joe Biden has this angry 40-minute phone call with Benjamin Netanyahu. And the very next day, food, aid going into Gaza quadrupled. Biden finally demanded that the indiscriminate bombing stop. And Netanyahu has troops withdraw. Only a handful of troops remain in southern Gaza. Now, none of this is permanent. None of this is just like great news to jump around about because Netanyahu still promises to go into Rafah. He says that's the only way to root out the rest of Hamas and end this war. Of course, he doesn't want to end it. He wants it to keep going because it's the only thing keeping him out of jail. There are way too many. Oh man, there are way too many plot points here. But that's Netanyahu's deal. He's up on charges of corruption. He's going to be convicted and in jail the minute he's out of office. So he's staying in office as long as he can. Demonstrations in Israel, citizens of Israel protesting in numbers that we haven't seen in quite a long time. Just very recently, the tide has turned a little bit. And domestically speaking, Joe Biden, again, made the phone call. He didn't necessarily promise what we've been asking, and that is not another nickel until you fix things. No, but he did say, he didn't specifically say aid would be conditioned. Again, would have been better. But he did say both publicly and privately to Netanyahu, we're going to have to rethink our own positions if you don't do something about yours. So something. Now, God, whoever thinks we don't live in a racist country or a racist world, the uproar because Western white aid workers were killed and the boss of the outfit is a celebrity chef. Now, I don't mean to use these mocking tones. Of course their deaths were awful. Of course they were. So were the 200 previous killings of aid workers. 200 before this incident. And not a word from anybody who mattered, who has any sort of decision-making power, from the White House to Congress, major media. 200 aid workers. And I don't know the number, but at least that many, maybe 3 times that many healthcare workers, doctors, nurses. I mean, this has been deplorable from the beginning. I always say, will you just please listen to those on the left, those of us on the left? Would you just listen to us from the beginning? We can save a lot of time and a lot of trouble if you just listen to us from the beginning. 6 months ago, those of us on the left were saying this is unacceptable. This is going to lead to nothing good. This is genocide in the making. These are war crimes. Using food as a weapon of war, starving children as a weapon of war, entirely destroying Gaza, making it uninhabitable. These are war crimes. These are genocidal war crimes. And they've been going on for 6 months, and now all of a sudden, because a celebrity chef, 6 of his white workers are killed, now you're going to pay attention? Well, welcome to the club, finally. If it took this to get you here, okay. But Jesus. So we do have some movement now, but nobody can be optimistic. Yes, it's good that Joe finally made that phone call that he should have made 6 months ago. Yes, it's good that troops have been withdrawn. Yes, it's good that the very next day after the phone call, food aid was quadrupled. Yes, that's good. So let's just try to be happy about what we've got, where there's no guarantee about what's going to happen next. We can't just sit back and say, well, we won this one. No, far from it. And Netanyahu, as I said, still promises to go into Rafah. So we'll see what happens there because, again, part of Joe's phone call, don't you go into Rafah unless you get everybody out first. You get the civilians out. You make a plan. You make it real. Do you remember 6 months ago when this started? The first words out of Joe's mouth were good, and I applauded him for it. He warned Israel on day 1. He said, don't make the mistakes that we made after 9/11. Revenge is not a policy. You can't destroy ideas with bombs. He said the right things on day 1, but he never followed through with any kind of commitment to them. He didn't put his words into action. He sat by. He let this happen. Joe could have done this 6 months ago. He could have conditioned aid. Yes, I'll give you aid for defensive weapons, but I'm not going to give you weapons to attack innocent women and children and men of Palestine. No, I'm not going to do it. All right, but let's be thankful that something happened in the right direction here, and negotiations continue between Hamas, or at least the surrogates of Hamas. So we'll see. And also, I want to say that in a weird way, this gives me a little hope. The phone call from President Joe to Netanyahu, it gives me a little hope that maybe democracy is not quite 100% dead yet. There's a little hope. Joe can be pushed and pulled. He has been his entire political career. We've seen that. One of the criticisms from the right is that Joe can be the puppet of the left. And that criticism is actually well-founded. Yes, he can. Joe can be pushed and pulled. I mean, this is a lame kind of democracy, but it's the only one we've got right now. And in a weird way, this is good news for democracy. It kind of worked. So take credit. Take credit for that. The 100,000 people in Michigan and the 40-plus thousand people in Wisconsin who voted uninstructed or undirected or whatever that was for the presidential primaries, the Democratic primary. They see these numbers and they still have to get elected. So in a weird way, democracy is working. I don't know. It doesn't feel very satisfying, does it? But there you go. And again, thank you. Take a bow. Take some credit. Because when 40,000 Wisconsin voters vote uninstructed, and Joe won Wisconsin by 20,000 votes 4 years ago. Okay, do the math. That says something. And he was just in Wisconsin again yesterday, I think it was. And, speaking of democracy working, even though it's it's a little shady, it does get their attention when they feel they could actually lose a vote. Look at the student debt relief. Joe has made a real priority of that ever since the court shut down his first far sweeping legislation. That didn't go. That didn't fly with the courts. And ever since then, he's been trying to find ways to do something. And he just announced another program this week. And it's in perfect sort of Democratic Party style of, it's way more complicated than it needs to be. And you got to jump through a bunch of hoops and you have to apply. And it's all so messy. But it's something. It's something. So, yeah, if you love and care about this country, about the innocent people of Palestine, about injustice anywhere, if you love and you care and you act, things can still happen, I guess, sort of. Man, we'll take any kind of hope where we can get it. Staying with politics here for a little bit. The no labels, which threatened to really throw a big wrench into the 24 election, has decided not to run a candidate. Well, that's not really accurate. They just acknowledged that no one would do it. They asked over 30 people, according to something I read. It was over 30 people they approached if they wanted to run for president. And they all said, no thanks. So that's one less thing we can worry about. Now we just need to worry about Jill Stein and Cornel West, which I have very mixed feelings about. Cornel West, I love Cornel West, and if we lived in a world where elections were actually fair, we had ranked choice voting, everybody had an equal shot, I'd probably vote for Cornel West. But that's not the world we live in, and he's really not going to get. I don't know how many ballots he's going to be on, state ballots, like none. So he's become kind of a non-issue. Jill Stein, on the other hand, will be a factor, as will Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who continues to make bad headlines. It's funny with RFK, because if you actually listen to a full speech and not just because everybody hates RFK. I mean, the media just, oh my God. You only get the very worst lowlights of what he has to say, and they're not hard to find because every week it seems he has one or two really horrible things to say. But the funny thing is, if you listen to a whole speech, which I have, or if you go to his website and read his priorities, it's too bad we don't have somebody with his ideas and priorities who's not also crazy. And the whole conspiracy theory, anti-vax side of him, because his ideas about how, corporations rule and they're unfair and the environment is a mess and doesn't need to be. And even when he says his more kind of ookie dookie weirdo stuff about, when he announced his running mate, he said one of the reasons he liked her is because she was into health. And everybody laughed and made jokes. I didn't find anything funny about that at all. I think it's great. I think there should be a great priority put on mental and physical health and all the dangers that money and corporations and the profit system bring to that health. All the danger. Half the products in the grocery store are just there to poison you. My God. And so he's not off base. I really like RFK Jr. on most of his issues. But I could never vote for him because of the wacko stuff. He's really right-wing on the border, on migration issues, on immigration issues. And the whole anti-vax, anti-science, I've done my own research kind of conspiracy theory stuff, just makes him ineligible. I'm sorry. Like I say, it's too bad we couldn't have the good RFK and eliminate the bad RFK. Maybe someday we'll have that with somebody. Politics. Okay, Trump on abortion. We got to talk about abortion. Okay, so he puts out this video where he's just blatantly political. He says it right out loud. He doesn't even try to hide it. Hey, we got to win elections, and people don't like this abortion stuff. So basically, he came down, and it doesn't matter what he says. Let's say this up front, because he lies constantly. If he's moving his mouth, he's lying. So it really almost doesn't matter what he says. But here's what he said. Proud to be the president to undo Roe v. Wade, still very proud of that, which means it goes back to the states, and that's where it belongs. So he's perfectly happy to have all the colors of the rainbow across the political spectrum on abortion law. And as we talked about last week, was it last week we talked about this, or did it happen since? I forgot. Florida passed the 6-week ban. Yeah. Oh, it's Arizona since we spoke last. Yeah, they're the ones who upheld, the Arizona Supreme Court upheld the old law banning abortion from 1864, before Arizona became a state. See, this happened in Wisconsin too, but we've since undone that. But yeah, the minute Roe v. Wade fell, it triggered laws around the country, Wisconsin being one. Again, I say we've taken care of that here. But Arizona being another one, triggered a law from 1864, before Arizona was a state. Codified in 1901, carries a prison sentence of 2 to 5 years for abortion providers. And it puts Arizona among the states with the strictest abortion laws in the country. Yeah, Arizona became a state in 1912. Women got the right to vote in 1920 in this country. And this law goes back to 1864. So it's wild, but it's kind of like last week's Florida news. It's horrible for the women who have to deal with these issues. The silver lining, if you want to squint real hard and find one, I guess it's real. This is another political gift. Arizona has a very tight Senate race right now between Democrat Ruben Gallego and Republican Carrie Lake, the MAGA Republican, who lost her bid for, what was she running for last time? Was she running for Senate last time? I think so. She also ran for governor. I forget. Anyway, she's running for Senate against Ruben Gallego. And she's taken now the Trump approach of just say anything to try to get some centrist votes, some of those suburban women that they crave. So they're saying anything to get a vote on abortion. But everybody knows, and as everybody said, Joe Biden said it himself just the other day, if a Republican House and Senate pass a national abortion ban, if there's a President Orange Menace, he will sign. Absolutely. There's no question about that. Absolutely he will. As opposed to Joe and the Democrats, they promise a lot. They're promising if they have the votes to do it, House and Senate, they'd have to kill the filibuster to do it, which is something they haven't been able to do yet. But they promised to codify Roe v. Wade into law. So, yeah, the abortion story is very big this week. It's very big. Usually, you can almost always ignore what the Orange Menace says on any given day because it's always just kind of ridiculous, bloviating about one thing or another. But this has real ramifications and deserves all the attention that it's getting. If you want to live in a country where abortion is rare, safe, and legal, you got one choice. If you want one where it continues to be a political football, and several states, now there are how many? 14 states with very, very strict or no abortions at all. And women have to, practically die before they can prove to a judge that they need an abortion, or they have to flee to another state, in which case they risk being prosecuted because now laws are being put into place where you can't even do that. I mean, Lord Almighty. When Dobbs fell, of course, it was a huge issue. Election after election that followed all went on the pro-choice side. And there were some people who thought, well, maybe by the presidential election of 2024, this will no longer be a driving issue. Well, that is no longer a debatable point. 2024 election is only a few months away, and it's absolutely 100% guaranteed that abortion will be a driving factor. And the fact that the economy is doing so well by the numbers, and we'll talk more. We've talked about the economy. We'll talk more in future shows. But by the numbers, the economy is looking good. Unemployment stays very low. Wages going up. Inflation's still a little bit of a problem, but not like it was. They don't have that one. They don't even have the border really anymore as an issue, the Republicans, because of how the Orange Men has handled that and kind of dictating to the House Republicans to not allow a vote on the immigration compromise of the southern border. So Republicans are running out of issues. They're desperate to have the border issue. Don't know how strong that's going to be. They're desperate to have crime. Don't know how strong that's going to be. They're desperate to have the economy. They can make some pretty good arguments, but from their side, the arguments don't work. I've got a lot of criticism from the left. And here's the thing, and this is what I'll close with. I've got lots of criticism of the Democrats and of the status quo on the same issues that Republicans will criticize, but my criticism comes from a completely different angle. The particular angles that Republicans use aren't going to work, and their solutions are ridiculous. Well, okay, we're going to save the economy by giving billionaires another $1 trillion tax cut. Who thinks that's a good idea? So the Republicans are running out of ammunition. I'm not quite sure. And now they're just really doubling and tripling and quadrupling down on the no more aid to Ukraine. I don't know how that's going to go over with American voters. Joe finally made at least kind of a PR turn, if nothing else, on Israel. Let's see how that goes over with voters. So on the most important issues of the day, I don't see where Republicans are going to get a foothold. We'll see. We'll see. All right, out of time for today. Reminder that you can hear this podcast on Apple or, wherever you find your podcast. I always encourage you to go to the website, charlespurcell.com, because all the links are there and all the archives of all the shows. Thanks to our flagship terrestrial station, River West Radio. Theme music composed and performed by Peter Donalds. I'm Charles Purcell. This is The Log. Talk to you next week.